Hi everybody, this is Neil Bradshaw, maker of the UberPiSystem, UberPiDisk. And for this video, I'm going to show you some basic ways to get around in RetroPie, the video game emulator. So to get started, I'm going to boot up the system. It's going to take us through the boot screen, the Berry boot screen. Berry boot is just the bootloader for all the different operating systems that exist. I'm doing this with a keyboard and a mouse off to the side of the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and click on RetroPie, which it would have automatically booted into in 10 seconds anyway. We're on our way in RetroPie now. So the basic gist of RetroPie is that most of your navigation is going to be done with a controller like this. I happen to have a Bale 2.4 gigahertz wireless controller. It's got a USB receiver that's plugged into my Raspberry Pi, which is down there. And so basically, to get around, you just first make sure your controller is actually on, because this one will go to sleep. You use your arrows to move around. And this button I've configured to be my A button, and this button I've configured to be my B button. So, say you want to go to Super Nintendo. Well, for Super Nintendo you just press the A button. And then you go down, and there's a bunch of ROMs. And I'll just pick one of my favorite ones, Turtles in Time, and you just hit A. And so your A button, right now, that little menu you just saw, you can press any button and you can custom configure a ROM or all the ROMs to use particular emulators and setups and stuff like that. Usually you won't have to worry about anything like that. And so, here we are in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. Just do one player real quick. I'll go ahead and pick Leonardo. Skip through the video. And we're off to playing. About that fast. Now, say you get into a game like this and you don't want to play it anymore. You're sick of it. You're tired of being a Ninja Turtle. You want to be a Street Fighter. So what you do is you press the start and select button at the same time. There's April and Neil nagging me to fight. And you're out. You're back out. You press the B button. What you have configured is the B button, which on this controller is this button down here, and that takes you out. So now you're out. Now there are a couple of menu options that you can do. There's some stuff you can do with RetroPie itself. And that's not what I meant to do. So let's get out of here. Here's where I meant to actually go. So you have audio, Bluetooth, configuration editor, blah blah blah, file manager. You won't have to mess with most of this stuff. The Wi-Fi gets carried over from Berry boot, so you're already on the Wi-Fi. And about the only thing you really will have to mess with is the second one, Bluetooth. If you have a Bluetooth game controller, you'll want to configure it. And there's videos on the website on how to do that. But we'll back out of here. And then the other way you can go to menus that access configurations with RetroPie, you just hit the start button And for instance, if you wanted to configure the input of, say, a second controller, you'd go to configure input and hit the A button. So I hit the start button to get in here and the A button to actually configure the input. It knows that there's two game pads. Here's my second game pad. So I'm going to configure it by pushing any button. Just push and hold a button. And then you just go through the sequence: up, down, left, right. Push whatever you want to be the start button, whatever you want to be the select button. Now for the A, B, X, Y configuration, regardless of what the controller says, I always go A, B, X, Y. That seems to work the best in most games. And then obviously the left shoulder and right shoulder buttons. The trigger buttons are going to be the ones that are behind the shoulder buttons. So I'm going to press them. For your left thumb, you're going to push in. And your right thumb, you're going to push in. And then your left analog, up, down, left, right. And your right analog, up, down, left, right. Now say that you have a button that didn't configure right for some reason. You just go back up. We'll just say the left thumb didn't configure right. So you push two buttons at the same time and it's going to gripe at me about being already taken. But when it gets done doing that, which might take a minute unfortunately, you would push two buttons at the same time and then it'll say press any button, and that's where you got to be real careful, because if you lit off one before the other it does this. But if you actually do it right and lit off at the same time, then it will allow you to reconfigure that button to whatever you want it to be. So as soon as this thing quits thinking about what I did wrong, story of my life, there we go, it just did it. So it was, when I was pushing buttons to try and get out of it, it was thinking that all those buttons are already taken. So you push two buttons at the same time, like your two top buttons, or right here, and then you just push whatever button you really want to be the left thumb, which is the left thumb, and that gets you configured just like you need to be. And then you just push OK, which sometimes that can take a minute or two, but it went through pretty quickly. And that's how you configure a controller. So that's the basic gist of RetroPie and getting around. Is you need a controller. Your keyboard is not going to be relevant unless you start getting really deep into menus like the Bluetooth configuration, or like you can go to the console by hitting the F4 key, and then you're in the console, which is basically a Linux console. You just type exit to get out of it, and it'll reboot back into emulation station. Unless you're going to get deep with it, you basically need a controller, and you got to have a controller in order to get around in RetroPie. So with that concludes this session, and I hope this helps you out with getting around in RetroPie on the UberPiSystem, UberPiDisk, and you won't get too confused. Thank you for your support.